If you're someone who owns a digital SLR camera, then there's a huge range of all-in-one Walkaround Superzoom lenses available on the market today. Not to mention second-hand ones to be found on eBay. Superzoom lenses give you a focal length that goes from a wide angle and zooms all the way into long telephoto, which makes them convenient and easy to use. You don't have to keep changing lenses. They don't always have great image quality, and they also don't let in much light. But they are convenient, and some people love them. In this video, I'm going to look at 6 of the main Superzoom lenses on the market today. They're all available new, and they all have image stabilization, and they all fit on APS-C digital SLR cameras, also known as crop sensor cameras. Although the Canon lenses will only fit on Canon cameras. Take a look at the description for some notes on other lenses too. I'm going to rate them all by their zoom range, by their build quality, by how sharp they are, how much colour fringing they show, also known as chromatic aberration, an example of which you can see here, and finally their value for money. And if you'd like any more information on any of these lenses, click on the review link at the bottom. Let's dive in. We'll start with the least expensive lens on this list. The Taman 18-200mm VC Di2 lens is brand new, and it costs an incredibly low price of only £179 or $250 US. Its zoom range of 18-200mm is average for this kind of lens, but it has slightly nicer build quality than you would expect of such an inexpensive piece of kit. It doesn't feel cheap or nasty to use, and it's comparatively small and light. Its manual focus ring isn't very precise though, so manual focusing will be a bit fiddly. Unfortunately, after some careful testing, I found this lens to be noticeably softer than any other Superzoom lens I've tried. At wide angles, you have to stop the lens down to f5.6 to get acceptable sharpness, and as you zoom into 200mm, the lens gets even softer, particularly as you look into the corners, and we can also see some rather strong chromatic aberration. So the lens is great value, and it might be good enough for Facebook pictures or small printouts, but it's certainly not what you're looking for if you want really crisp, detailed pictures. I give this lens 13.5 stars. Next up in price, we have the Canon 18-135mm IS-STM. This is the lens with the shortest focal range of the whole bunch. It only zooms into 135mm, which only just gets it into the Superzoom class. Other lenses can get a lot closer. However, this shorter zoom range lends the device a few advantages. It's one of the least expensive lenses in its class, and it seems to be one of the sharpest too, resolving pretty decent sharpness at wide angles or telephoto. It's also not a very big lens, and it has very tight build quality. It's specially designed to be an excellent lens for video work too, having completely silent and very efficient image stabilization, and a completely silent and very efficient autofocus motor. The short zoom range seems to be this lens's only real disadvantage at the end of the day, and so it gets a healthy 16 stars. Next up in price, it's the Sigma 18-200mm C lens. Sigma have released a few 18-200mm lenses, and this is their latest one, complete with image stabilization and Sigma's new cosmetic design. It's a practically small lens, and the good news is that it's actually decently sharp. For a Superzoom, it can get pictures with good detail, especially if you stop down its aperture a little, and the lens is always sharp in the middle of its images, even at 200mm. Things that I didn't love about the Sigma lens were its old-fashioned autofocus system and its somewhat wobbly image stabilization, which is a spanner in the works for video shooting. But for an 18-200mm lens, its image quality is undeniably good, so it gets a good high score of 15.5 stars. Next up, we have a slightly older lens, the Canon 18-200mm IS. This is one of Canon's oldest EF-S lenses, and its image quality is not quite as good as the newer Sigma lens, showing a little less sharpness in its images, especially at 200mm. But at wider angles it is actually pretty sharp, giving you quite usable images. The lens is nice enough to handle, although its autofocus system is a little old-fashioned. You can only turn that manual focus ring when the lens is set to manual focus. The autofocus does make a little noise, but it works quickly. At about £340 or $480 US, it's expensive compared to the competition, especially considering its age. But one advantage is that, as a Canon lens, you do have access to in-camera corrections for vignetting and chromatic aberration, if your camera has that feature. 13.5 stars. Next up in price comes the Taman 16 to 300mm lens. This is where things get interesting. Being able to zoom into 300mm is impressive enough, but this lens can also zoom out as wide as 16mm, which, as you can see here, is noticeably wider than 18mm. It's a record-breaking zoom range, which no other manufacturer is likely to beat for a long time. Another major advantage of the Taman 16 to 300 is its lovely build quality. It has good image stabilization and the most sophisticated autofocus system out of all these lenses, with silent focusing and a precise manual focus ring which you can turn at any time. Unfortunately, its image quality is not great. It's decently sharp at wider angles, but it gets rather soft as you zoom in, particularly in the corners of your images. It also has monstrous problems with chromatic aberration, some of the worst I've ever seen, especially at 300mm, where all kinds of interesting colours on contrasting edges are on display for you. At £380, it's not cheap either, although admittedly you do get a lot of zoom range for your money. It's undeniably a very fun lens though, with good build quality, and it gets 14.5 stars. Finally, we have the Sigma 18 to 300mm C. It's about the same price as the Tamron 16 to 300, depending on where you look. It doesn't offer the same wonderful wide angle of 16mm, and it doesn't offer quite the same nice build quality either, having yet another old-fashioned autofocus system, where you can't safely turn the focus ring with the lens set to autofocus. In terms of sharpness, the Sigma lens gives a more even performance than a Taman 16 to 300. It's not quite as sharp as the Tamron lens is at wide angles, but the Sigma lens is a bit sharper when you zoom in to 300mm, and it displays less disturbing chromatic aberration too. Overall, I would say that this Sigma lens has an edge in picture quality over the Taman 16 to 300, but the Taman lens's wider angle and better build quality make it a lot more fun to handle. The Sigma 18 to 300 gets 14 stars. At the end of the day, each of these lenses has its own advantages. The best overall is the Canon 18 to 135mm STM, I would say. It has a very healthy mixture of good image quality and very good build quality, and all for a reasonable price. It's also the best designed lens on this list for video work. If you want a bit more zoom range though, then I recommend the Sigma 18 to 200mm. It's nice and small, and it manages to remain quite a sharp lens while not costing a fortune. I didn't particularly like its build quality, but at this price you can't have everything. If you're going on holiday and you want a good travel lens, then I might recommend the Taman 16 to 300. Its picture quality is a bit crazy at 300mm, but if you're on holiday, then you'll probably be getting lots of nice wide-angle 16mm pictures, where the lens is really wide and actually sharp enough. Finally, if you're going bird watching or on safari, you might want to try the Sigma 18 to 300, as it offers passable image quality at 300mm, an incredibly long focal length for those telephoto shots of animals or whatever it is you're shooting. Have a think about which lens would work for you, and have fun making up your mind. God bless.